June 26, 1943, somewhere over the English Channel. Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 56th Fighter Group, 61st Fighter Squadron, United States Army Air Forces, cannot see. Hydraulic fluid and engine oil have smeared across what remains of his windscreen. His right leg is bleeding, shrapnel from a 20mm cannon shell that detonated inside the cockpit. His instrument panel is destroyed. The massive Pratt & Whitney R2-800 engine is shuddering under mechanical distress so severe he can feel it through the rudder pedals. And his canopy? The only thing between him and a parachute is jammed shut, warped by the structural damage to the airframe. He is trapped inside a burning, crippled Republic P-47 Thunderbolt at low altitude over the most heavily defended airspace in the world. And the Focke-Wulf 190 behind him is not finished. The German pilot positions at Johnson's 6 o'clock, the classic kill vector. He fires. 20mm cannon shells and 7.92mm machine gun rounds tear into the thickest sections of the P-47's fuselage, shredding duralumin skin into ragged ribbons of metal. In any other fighter aircraft of 1943, Spitfire, Hurricane, Yak, even the American P-51, a single 20mm high-explosive Meinengeschoss shell is often enough to sever a wing spar or kill the pilot outright. The German fires again, a second pass, then a third. A 20mm shell detonates directly behind Johnson's headrest. The blast is absorbed entirely by the thick, sloped armor plate that Republic Aviation's engineering team had obsessively integrated into the cockpit structure. But the German pilot doesn't fire a fourth time. He has nothing left to fire. He has emptied every round he carries into this American fighter, and it is still flying. He pulls alongside. Johnson, one eye swollen shut, the other burning, can see the man's face through the Focke-Wulf's canopy. The expression shifts. Professional confidence to confusion. Confusion to something Johnson would remember for 55 years. The German stares at the P-47. Over 200 holes in the fuselage, and that count was made later, before the ground crew even walked around to the other side. Skin peeled back in ribbons, oil hemorrhaging from every seam, the canopy shattered, the rudder half gone, and still flying. The German pilot shook his head slowly. Then he raised his hand. A salute. He banked hard and disappeared into the clouds over France. Johnson flew on alone. What kind of machine absorbs everything a veteran Luftwaffe fighter pilot can throw at it? 3 deliberate firing passes, cannon shells and machine gun rounds, a 20mm detonation inches from the pilot's skull, and simply refuses to die. The answer would transform the air war over Europe, because the aircraft the Germans had mocked as the flying bathtub was about to become the most produced American fighter of the entire war. And the Luftwaffe would pay for the joke with its existence. When the P-47 Thunderbolt first appeared in the skies over occupied Europe in early 1943, it was greeted with open derision, and not just from the Germans. British Royal Air Force pilots mocked it too. Its proportions were unprecedented. Over 10,000 pounds empty, nearly 17,500 pounds fully loaded with fuel and ammunition, more than twice the maximum takeoff weight of a Messerschmitt Bf 109. Its fuselage was so massive, so barrel-chested, that European aviators looked at it and saw an aerodynamic joke. They called it the Jug, short for juggernaut. The Germans, whose entire fighter philosophy was built around lightweight, agile interceptors engineered for rapid climb rates and tight turning radii, classified it as an aerodynamic abomination, far too heavy and sluggish to survive in airspace dominated by nimble Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts. This institutional contempt flowed from the top. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, supreme commander of the Luftwaffe, consistently underestimated American engineering capability. To Göring, the United States was a commercial nation, capable of producing razor blades and refrigerators, perhaps, but not the precision aerospace engineering required to challenge the Third Reich in the sky. He had once boasted that no enemy bomber would reach Berlin, or his name was Meyer. He viewed the heavy American fighters appearing over France with the same dismissive certainty. What the Luftwaffe didn't know, what their intelligence apparatus willfully refused to see, was that the P-47's massive bulk was not a design flaw. It was an engineering necessity. Alexander Kartveli, the Georgian-born chief designer at Republic Aviation, had studied the combat reports from the early air war over Europe and drawn a radical conclusion. He did not design the Thunderbolt to outturn a Messerschmitt. He designed it to outdive, outgun, and outsurvive absolutely anything else in the sky. The enormous fuselage existed for two reasons: to house the monstrous 18-cylinder Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp radial engine, capable of generating over 2,000 horsepower, and to contain the complex internal ducting for its turbo supercharger system. Ducting so critical to the aircraft's performance that Kartveli designed it first, then built the rest of the airplane around it. The turbo supercharger gave the P-47 an operational ceiling above 40,000 feet, well above the optimal performance altitude of most German interceptors. But the Germans had reasons for their confidence. In early 1943, those reasons looked solid. The P-47 was unproven. American fighter pilots were green, and the early combat record suggested the mockery might be justified. The P-47 was not born dangerous. It was born difficult. The 56th Fighter Group arrived in England in January 1943 as the first unit to operate the Thunderbolt in combat. The aircraft they received were still being debugged. Training at Bridgeport, Connecticut had produced more than 40 crashes and 18 fatalities, before a single pilot in the unit ever saw a German airplane. The machine that would eventually break the Luftwaffe killed its own pilots first. And then there was Johnson himself. Before that June day over the Channel, Robert S. Johnson had failed gunnery training. He couldn't hit the target sleeve. He wasn't officially qualified to fly the P-47 in combat when he flew his first mission on April 18, 1943. His group commander, Colonel Hubert Zemke, had doubts about him. But underneath the rough start, the P-47 carried engineering that no other fighter in the world could match. Engineering that wouldn't reveal its true value until someone tried very hard to kill one. The R2800 Double Wasp was air-cooled. 18 cylinders arrayed in two radial rows cooled by airflow over heavy metal fins. This was not a minor technical detail. It was the single most important survival feature of the entire aircraft. Every inline liquid-cooled engine in the war, the Rolls-Royce Merlin in the P-51 Mustang, the Daimler-Benz in the Bf-109, the Allison in the P-38, relied on a fragile network of coolant lines and radiators. A single bullet through a coolant line meant the engine seized. The pilot was finished. But the R2800 had no coolant lines, no radiator. Entire cylinders could be shot away. Oil lines could be severed. And the massive radial engine would stubbornly continue to fire, pulling 5 tons of battered airplane through the sky and bringing its pilot home. Then there were the guns. 8.50 caliber Browning M2 heavy machine guns, 4 in each wing, fed by a total of 3,400 rounds of ammunition. The combined rate of fire poured approximately 12 to 13 pounds of armor-piercing incendiary steel through the air every single second. At standard combat convergence range, the effect on an enemy aircraft was not damage. It was destruction. A concentrated stream of kinetic energy that could saw through an engine block, sever flight control linkages, and rupture fuel tanks simultaneously. German doctrine favored fewer, larger caliber explosive cannon shells, the precision philosophy. One well-placed 20mm Menengeschoss could kill a fighter. The American answer was different. Not precision, saturation. 8 streams of .50 caliber fire that filled a volume of airspace with so much metal that precision became irrelevant. And behind those guns and that engine, Republic's engineers had installed armor plate. Thick, sloped, positioned directly behind the pilot's head. Designed specifically to absorb 20mm cannon shell detonations. The armor plate that, on June 26, 1943, would be the only reason Robert Johnson's skull remained intact. 5,000 miles from the English Channel, in Evansville, Indiana, a woman whose name appears in no history book stood on a factory floor that, 18 months earlier, had produced consumer goods. Now it produced P-47 Thunderbolts. She assembled turbo supercharger ducting, the complex internal network that Cartvelli had designed first, before everything else. She had never seen an airplane fly. The ducting she installed that morning would sit inside the belly of a fighter that, in 6 months, would absorb 200 hits over occupied France and bring its pilot home alive. She didn't know this. She tightened the last bolt, stood up, stretched her back, and reached for the next assembly. June 26, 1943 was supposed to be routine. 48 P-47Cs from the 56th Fighter Group took off from RAF Manston late in the afternoon to escort B-17 Flying Fortresses returning from a bombing raid against Villacoublay Airfield near Paris. As the Thunderbolts approached the rendezvous point near Forges-les-Eaux, 16 Focke-Wulf FW-190s of 2nd Gruppe Jagdgeschwader 26 dropped on them from above and behind. The first pass scattered the formation. Johnson, flying at the rear of the 61st Squadron, never had a chance to react. An FW-190 put 21 20mm cannon shells into his fuselage in the opening seconds. His hydraulic system ruptured, the canopy shattered, shrapnel buried itself in his leg, a machine gun bullet grazed the tip of his nose. Fire licked into the cockpit. The P-47 spun, plummeting toward the channel. 4 Thunderbolts were shot down into the water. A 5th crashed off the English coast. 7 more returned with serious damage. 2 so badly mauled they were scrapped. It was the 56th Fighter Group's worst day of the war to that point. The aircraft the Germans mocked was getting killed. Johnson somehow kicked left rudder, leveled the wings, and pulled back on the stick. The fire went out. The R2-800 kept running. He was alive. Blinded by oil, bleeding, trapped in a cockpit he couldn't escape, flying a machine that had no business still being airborne, but alive. He turned toward England. And then he saw the Focke-Wulf behind him. He couldn't run. He couldn't fight. His guns were inoperable. He couldn't bail out. He hunched down behind the armor plate and waited. The German pilot took his time. The first pass. Cannon shells hammering into the fuselage. The massive P-47 shuddered but held. The second pass. More hits. The 20mm shell behind the headrest. The blast that should have ended everything, absorbed by 6 inches of sloped steel. The third pass. Everything the German had left. Machine gun rounds stitching across the wings and tail. Then silence. This is impossible. I've hit him with everything I have. The identity of the German pilot has never been confirmed. For decades, the encounter was attributed to Major Egon Meyer, the decorated ace and Gruppenkommandeur of 3/JG2 Richthofen, the man who had pioneered the devastating head-on attack tactic against B-17 formations, and who would eventually be credited with 102 aerial victories. The attribution entered popular history through Roger Freeman's The Mighty Eighth, and was repeated by the History Channel. But modern research has cast serious doubt on it. Don Caldwell's authoritative JG-26 War Diary notes that the attackers were from 2/JG-26, not Meyer's JG-2, and concludes that the identity of the pilot who made the final passes on Johnson's P-47 is unfortunately not known. No JG-2 victories were recorded that day matching the encounter. But whoever he was, ace or anonymous, JG-2 or JG-26, what he did next entered aviation legend. He pulled alongside the shattered American fighter, close enough that Johnson, through his one functional eye, could see the man's face. Young, his expression shifting as he surveyed the wreckage. Over 200 holes, skin hanging in strips, oil streaming, the canopy destroyed, and the massive, bleeding, impossible machine still flying. The German pilot shook his head. He raised his hand in a salute, pilot to pilot. Then he banked away and disappeared into the clouds over France. Johnson, navigating by dead reckoning through an oil-smeared windscreen, nursed the P-47 across the channel on nothing but the brute momentum of the R-2800 and landed at Manston Air Base. The ground crew counted the holes. They stopped at 200. They hadn't finished the other side yet. The German pilot peeled away into the clouds. Johnson flew on, alone. The salute was the sound of a crack forming in the foundation of the Luftwaffe's confidence. But the avalanche that would follow had nothing to do with individual duels over the English Channel. It came from the factories. 15,683. That is how many P-47 Thunderbolts the United States produced between 1941 and 1945. The most produced American fighter aircraft of the entire war. Two factories ran simultaneously: Republic Aviation's primary facility at Farmingdale, Long Island, and the massive secondary plant at Evansville, Indiana. Evansville alone built 6,242. At peak production in 1944, the two plants combined were completing 28 P-47s every single day. The German approach to fighter production was the opposite. German aerospace engineers were brilliant. Kurt Tank, Willy Messerschmitt, Ernst Heinkel. Their machines were individually superb. The FW-190 was an outstanding fighter. The Bf-109 was continuously refined throughout the war. But they built them like master watchmakers, precision-crafted, hand-fitted, each one requiring skilled labor and careful assembly. But across the Atlantic, America wasn't building watches. It was building a flood. The unit cost of a fully equipped P-47 was approximately $85,000 to $105,000, depending on the variant and contract year. A single B-24 Liberator heavy bomber cost over $300,000. The Army Air Forces could field nearly 3 heavily armed, extraordinarily survivable fighters for the cost of one 4-engine bomber. And unlike bombers, the P-47 could fight back, fly ground attack, escort other bombers, and absorb punishment that would destroy any other single-engine fighter in the world. The subcontractor network behind each Thunderbolt stretched across the entire country. Roughly 100 companies contributed components. B.F. Goodrich supplied tires from Akron. Colt Firearms provided the 8.50 caliber Brownings from New Haven. General Electric and Maytag built electronics. And among the manufacturers was the Marmon Products Company of Inglewood, California, founded by Herbert Marx. Zeppo Marx, the fourth Marx brother. His company produced the ring clamps that secured every P-47 engine cowling in the war. The aircraft that would destroy the Luftwaffe was partially built by a vaudeville comedian. By mid-1944, the P-47 was no longer just an escort fighter. It had become the most feared ground attack aircraft in the European theater. The 9th Tactical Air Command sent Thunderbolts hunting ahead of the Allied armored spearheads after the Normandy breakout, armed not just with 8.50 calibers, but with up to 2,500 pounds of external ordnance, 500-pound bombs, high-velocity rockets. German panzer divisions attempting to maneuver for counterattacks found they could not move in daylight. The moment a supply convoy, a troop train, or an armored column appeared on a road, the P-47s found it. 12 pounds of lead per second, followed by bombs and rockets. While those Thunderbolts hunted across France, 5,000 miles away in Evansville, the production line had not stopped. Not for a single day. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey would later document what the Thunderbolts accomplished. P-47s were credited with the destruction of nearly 4,000 enemy aircraft, 9,000 locomotives, 86,000 trucks and motor vehicles, and 6,000 armored fighting vehicles. They flew over 500,000 sorties in the European theater alone and dropped 132,000 tons of bombs. The aircraft that was too heavy, too slow, and too ugly had become the single most destructive tactical weapon in the Allied arsenal. Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments, achieved what he later called dark miracles, temporarily increasing German airframe production through underground dispersal facilities and forced labor, even as Allied bombs fell on the factories above. But it was futile. The fighter bombers, the P-47s among them, had severed the logistical arteries. Trains couldn't deliver aviation fuel to forward airfields. Newly built German fighters sat on tarmacs, pristine and useless, until they were destroyed on the ground by strafing Thunderbolts or simply abandoned by retreating ground crews. The mathematics of industrial warfare don't reward perfection. They reward volume. And behind every one of those 15,683 P-47s that rolled off the line were workers. Women, retrained civilians, men too old for the draft, whose names appear in no history book, building a machine they would never fly, for a war they experienced only through newspaper headlines and letters from the front. Egon Mayer, whether or not he was the pilot who saluted Johnson, represented everything that individual excellence could achieve. 102 aerial victories, the pioneer of the head-on attack, a lethal predator who understood air combat at the highest level. He was killed on March 2, 1944, shot down by P-47 Thunderbolt escort fighters near Montmédy, France. He was 27 years old. Individual brilliance against industrial mathematics. It was never going to be enough. What does it mean to build 28 fighters a day? It means that somewhere in Indiana, a woman whose name no one will ever know tightened a bolt on a turbo supercharger housing, stood up, stretched her back, and reached for the next one. She did this 400 times a day. She did it for 3 years. April 26, 1945. The war has 19 days left. Adolf Galland, Generalleutnant, General der Jagdflieger, 104 aerial victories, the most famous fighter pilot in the Luftwaffe, sits in the cockpit of a Messerschmitt Me-262A-1. Twin Junkers Umo 004 turbojet engines, 540 miles per hour, the pinnacle of German aerospace engineering, the undisputed future of military aviation. No propeller-driven aircraft in the world can match its speed. Galland had spent years warning Goering about the American fighter threat. He had specifically noted the terrifying ruggedness of the P-47 and its lethal dive speed. His warnings were ignored. He was relieved of his command as General of Fighters in January 1945 for his constant criticism. Now he commands Jagdverband 44, a unit of Germany's last surviving aces, flying the only aircraft that can still outrun the enemy. He leads a formation of 12 Me-262s against a group of B-26 Marauder medium bombers from the 17th Bombardment Group. He reaches for his rocket switch to fire the R-4M air-to-air rockets. Nothing happens. He has forgotten to flick the second safety switch, a rookie's mistake. He uses his 430mm Mk-108 cannon instead, claims 2 Marauders destroyed, his 103rd and 104th victories. Then he makes the mistake that ends his war. He watches his second kill crash instead of checking his tail. First Lieutenant James J. Finnegan, 10th Fighter Squadron, 50th Fighter Group, 9th Air Force, is at 13,000 feet. He is flying a P-47D Thunderbolt, bubble canopy, natural metal finish, black nose. He sees two objects zip through the bomber formation below, and two Marauders explode. That can't be a prop job. It's gotta be one of those 262 jets. He pulls a split S and dives. The P-47 accelerates 500 miles per hour. The Thunderbolt, the flying bathtub, the aerodynamic abomination the Luftwaffe had laughed at, closes on the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world. 75 yards. Finnegan fires. A 3-second burst. 8.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns. The same guns the Luftwaffe intelligence apparatus had dismissed as insufficient for modern aerial combat. Strikes on the right engine. Strikes on the wing root. Inside the ME-262, Galland's instrument panel disintegrates. His canopy shatters. Something hits his right knee. Sharp, hard, final. The right engine dies. Metal covering tears loose in the wind. The left engine is hit. Power fading. I should bail out, but they shoot jet pilots in their parachutes. He doesn't bail out. He nurses the dying jet toward the airfield at München-Riem, trailing smoke. The nose wheel tire is flat. The landing is a controlled disaster. 150 miles per hour on a cratered strip, the shattered aircraft rattling and shrieking against the ground. P-47 Thunderbolts are strafing the airfield. He throws open the canopy, climbs out on a wounded knee, and half falls into the arms of a mechanic driving a Kettenkrad utility vehicle. The little tracked machine carries him to cover as .50 caliber rounds chew up the concrete behind them. His war is over. The most advanced fighter in the world, brought down by 8.50 caliber machine guns mounted in the wings of the aircraft the Luftwaffe had called too heavy to fight. Finnegan recorded the ME-262 as a probable. He wasn't sure he'd hit it. In all the smoke and clouds and 500-mile-per-hour chaos, he had no idea who was in that cockpit. He wouldn't know for 34 years. 3 weeks later, Germany surrendered. At Camp Ashcan, the Palace Hotel in Mondorf-les-Bains, Luxembourg, repurposed as a high-security detention center, Hermann Göring sat before Allied interrogators from the United States Strategic Bombing Survey, stripped of his medals, his morphine, his lavish uniforms. The man who had promised that no enemy bomber would reach Berlin now faced questions about how the Luftwaffe had been destroyed. He admitted that long-range American fighter escorts had delivered a decisive strategic blow. He confessed that their appearance deep over German territory had come as a complete surprise. And he acknowledged that when American fighters appeared over the capital of the Reich, he knew the results would be tragic. The pre-war arrogance had evaporated. The sky that Göring had promised to defend belonged to the Americans. Speer, at Nuremberg, delivered the mathematical autopsy. His production miracles, increasing airframe output through dispersal and slave labor, had been meaningless. The fighter bombers had cut the arteries. No fuel reached the airfields. No supplies reached the front. Thousands of pristine German fighters sat motionless on tarmacs across the Reich, waiting to be strafed or abandoned. The system was dead. And the man at the center of the legend, the pilot who had emptied his guns into Johnson's P-47 and saluted when it refused to die, whether he was Egon Mayer or an unknown Feldwebel from JG-26, the ending was the same. Mayer was killed on March 2, 1944, shot down by P-47 Thunderbolts near Montmedy, France. He was 27 years old. 102 victories. The first pilot to reach 100 kills entirely on the Western Front. Killed by the aircraft his comrades had dismissed as the flying bathtub. Robert S. Johnson flew 91 combat missions, all in P-47 Thunderbolts. 27 confirmed aerial victories. The first American fighter pilot in the European theater to surpass Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26. After the war, he went to work for Republic Aviation, the the company that built the machine that saved his life. He stayed for 18 years. He died in December 1998 in Oklahoma, where he had first seen an airplane as an 8-year-old boy at an air show at Fort Sill. In 1979, a graduate student at San Jose State University was cross-referencing combat reports from April 1945. He matched a probable claim filed by a P-47 pilot of the 50th Fighter Group with the details of Adolf Galland's last mission. At an Air Force Association meeting in San Francisco that year, the two men met for the first time. Galland tapped his right knee. "I've still got one fragment here from when you hit me, Jim." They became friends. Finnegan's attack on that April day had been his only combat claim of the entire war, a probable that turned out to be the most famous fighter ace in Germany. Galland died in 1996. Finnegan died in 2008. The flying bathtub, that's what they called it. Too heavy, too slow, too ugly, too American. 15,683 of them. And by May 1945, there were no Luftwaffe pilots left to laugh. If this story surprised you, subscribe, because the P-47 was only one chapter in how American industry broke the Axis war machine. And the next chapter is even more devastating.